we actually reached out to a professional. It was like a 7-day cleanse or one-to-one. Each one of us was going separately through it. And in that, you really look at all the different things that you've done. It's highly unpleasant because you are looking at all the stuff that you were denying, and you see some of the darkness and the hurt and the disempowerment that you have been playing in the relationship towards yourself and your partner.
Hello, and welcome to the Authentic Wednesday podcast. Each week, my guest and I share our vulnerable behind the scenes stories of giving ourselves permission to take off our masks, let go of expectations, and embrace our own path of freedom and authentic connection. I am your host, Bianca Hughes, a lover of authenticity. Hello, and welcome to the Authentic Wednesday podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast and just tuning into the podcast. I always appreciate you all being here and listening to the podcast. My name is Bianca Hughes and the host of the podcast. This is episode 68. I can't believe it's episode 68. And I have some guests. Yes, guests. I have a couple on the podcast today talking about authenticity in relationships, in your romantic relationships, because it looks different. And so I'm really excited about this episode and just talking to them. We just had such a great conversation and really probably answers a couple of questions or fears or concerns you might have about being your authentic self in a relationship and speaking your authentic truth. My guests on the show today are Natasha and Jachym Jerie. They are husband and wife co-founders of Your Exceptional Relationship. Their mission is to help women heal their hearts and transform their relationships so they can revolutionize the world. Having been on the brink of divorce, Natasha and Jachym now know firsthand how intimate relationships can bring out the worst in us. Their journey has led them to heal and create a deeply fulfilling marriage that's even better than the honeymoon. When they're not working or traveling together, you can find them in nature or uncovering the next best restaurant or hole in the wall. You can also listen to them on their podcast on awakenedwife.com. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation. So, hello and welcome to the Authentic Wednesday podcast, Natasha and Jachym. I want to make sure I pronounce his name right. Did I say it right?
Yeah, that's about right. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. It's great. We are from the future calling you.
They're in Singapore. No, Malaysia.
Kuala Lumpur, actually.
Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I've been there once too. And so it's Tuesday there and it's Monday here. So welcome. We had to work out the time difference, but they're so gracious. So I appreciate that. So welcome to the podcast. And we're just going to start off with my favorite question. What does authenticity mean to you? And you guys can, both answer individually.
For me, it's getting in tune with yourself, who you are, tapping into that truth, which I find is a process. I think authenticity, it's not one state and that's who you are and that's what it is for the rest of your life. It's something you have to discover and cover. And when you do, or when you tap into that, it's an expression. So I think it's like an inside out kind of process, because it's not authentic if it's not expressed. At least for me, it's blocked if it's still inside. So that's what authenticity means to me.
Oh, I love that. It can't be authenticity if it's not expressed. Okay.
All right. So I was thinking about this question, and one thing that came to mind, which is a little detour about what it's not, because I see a lot of people thinking, well, being authentic means to stick to a certain way of behavior that you've associated with yourself. And I personally disagree with that, because you can box yourself into I am this or that. And so if I don't do this or that, I'm not authentic.
Hmm.
But that's actually a mind construct about yourself that you're trying to live up to. And so for me, what authenticity actually is to be in the moment and responsive in the moment and work with the energy that's coming up in this moment.
Hmm. I love it. I love how it's different. I love that, but still so rich. So, what does authenticity mean in your relationship with each other? In terms of the marriage, or some people may just be in a romantic relationship, but any form of romantic relationship, what does that mean or even
Right.
look like?
So for me, when we take my definition, it's it's about being real in this moment with your spouse, with your partner. Now, there has to be some level of discernment as well, because being authentic for me is not necessarily just going all to the judgment about my partner and just telling them all the stuff
Mm,
that all the judgment that my mind has come up with. That's not really an authentic place. That's just all the garbage in my mind. That's happening. So for me, authenticity is actually more about dropping deeper into your body and feeling what's really true for you in this moment,
mm,
and then expressing that and being with that. But it can express itself in various ways. Just because you have, for example, an issue, let's say, with your partner, doesn't mean that you have to explode on them, right? You can honor this and still bring it into the conversation, but in a mature way.
mm. I love that. Thank you. And Natasha, is it the same?
It's similar. I think expressing yourself is one thing, which I mentioned, but when it comes to being in a relationship, there are clear skills you can learn to actually direct that message in a productive way.
Mm,
I think any problem that you face or any conflict, any differences, I mean, we've been through that and that's completely normal. But I think where most people really go wrong is the projection, where the message goes from inside you to the other person. And like Jachym said, it's like sometimes we confuse what's going on in our head because something might happen. It'll be just a one occurrence kind of event, but then you kind of think about it. You start to doubt yourself. You start to question your partner, and before you know it, it's a really, really, really big ball of energy that you're kind of spinning around in. And by the time you kind of address it or you bring it up, it's become something a lot more than what just happened.
mm,
There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
meaning to it. So yes, it's when it comes to authenticity in terms of your actual experience, you might be experiencing all that, like the emotional turmoil of it and the meaning and what it means for you in the past and the future and right now. And but like Yakim said, I think you said the word discernment. It is all
Mm-hmm.
also our responsibility to discern between what am I getting caught up in my mind. And yes, I can acknowledge what I'm experiencing emotionally as a human being, and that's okay. That's real too.
Mm-hmm.
But then to actually tackle a problem together, it requires you to actually take responsibility for all of these things, not just I feel this way, so therefore I'm gonna
Yeah.
just like bring it up, and who cares where it goes. It's like no. There is some level of responsibility here because there is another human being involved.
You know what it kind of makes me think of? It makes me think of like when you're with yourself, like to be authentic really means like there's no filter. Like all that stuff that's going on in your head, you can say out loud and figure out loud with yourself. And then after you've done that, then you begin to like kind of make sense of it. So when you bring it to your partner, it's still your truth, but you've kind of figured out some of the stuff before you're just like, I can't stand you right now. You could be like, oh, I need to get out of here. I can't stand him. And you're talking to yourself and you're saying those truths to yourself. But by the time you calm down, it's a
Mm.
different delivery. I think I'm hearing
yeah.
from you guys. Does that
Yeah, I,
make
I
sense?
I do agree with that, because the if you look at authenticity, a lot of people have certain coping mechanisms, right, in place about how to handle a certain situation, which they have learned in childhood or from other people or whatever, right? And a coping mechanism for me is not necessarily grounded in authenticity. So something happens and my mind starts going crazy and there's all this judgment or whatever happening in my mind. But actually, underneath, I feel hurt. Now, if you want to be really authentic, the hurt is where it's at. The other stuff is just smoke and mirrors,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that is what we're saying is you want to drop down to what's actually real, which often is then scary because if you're going to show that you're hurt, you're going to be vulnerable.
Mm.
But that is where you can get closer as a couple.
Yeah. You said the word. See, I love how that word, the V word. The vulnerable word. That is like, I don't want to go there. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. How did you guys kind of get to that space because in order to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable. What does that kind of mean for you guys in the relationship? How did you guys kind of get to that?
I personally really struggled with this. And I think it was because I kind of on the common denominator, I guess, was that I didn't find my emotions, what I was going through to be valuable. So at the beginning of our relationship, even when we moved in, because I'm Canadian, he's Swiss, I had to move to Switzerland. It was a big change, and we finally got together. So yay, no more long distance. We're finally together. We're finally living together. And then I realized that as you're being together more and more, there are things that either bother you, you don't like, you don't quite feel good about, or just things that's not quite right, like little things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I was in a healthy place, kind of mentally or emotionally, I take that as like kind of not warning signs, but just like feedback to actually speak to him, and maybe we adjust and we move towards like a better direction. But since deep down I didn't really value myself, and I didn't really respect myself that much, I would feel certain things, and I know that something was bothering me within our relationship, but I was like, it doesn't matter. Or like, who am I to ask him to change, or to say that this is not okay? And so for the longest time, I just stuffed it down and stuffed it down and stuffed it down. And I tried to be this happy person who didn't have any worries within this relationship, but that's not true. That's not true. So I think I was really in denial of the little things, and at the beginning they're very small and they're very subtle, and it's almost like easy to ignore. It's kind of like, just brush it off. It's okay, who cares? It's no big deal. Like, that's a big one. No big deal, right? But over time, that really bit me on my ass. Like, that does not work. It just accumulates. I just had a huge like storage room full of that.
Did you blow up?
It took several years.
Wow.
And I gotta tell you, when that builds up and you lock it up in that room, it doesn't just get dusty, it gets really ugly. It starts to leak into your other rooms. And I was building bitterness, resentment. I was holding all these grudges, because imagine if someone hurt you, someone you really, really love just did something and it hurts. And you don't say anything, you don't acknowledge it yourself, you don't tell the other person. And over years, you just stuff it in that room. Well, it's going to come out one way or another, quite unconsciously. So in the end, I mean, at the breaking point of our relationship, In the household, I became a little bit of a monster, as in, like, I would pick on him, I would nag at him. There was a lot of bickering. I was bringing him down a lot in those little ways that we all think it's okay. So whether it's like he washes a bell pepper, I'd be like, oh yeah, him, like, come on, like, you missed, like, how can you not see that? Or he, just the littlest things. I would just tell him what to do. I would criticize him. I would correct him. I would bring him down. And in me was actually this bitterness that I was so unhappy, actually, because I was getting my boundaries crossed again and again and again, and I did not speak up for myself. So eventually I did blow up. I did crack because
Mm.
I got to the point where I was so unhappy and I couldn't handle it. And I said yes to so many things. So it's as if, like, I consensually said yes and asked my partner to hurt me, like, because it's even worse than I don't know, getting cheated on or something, because you said yes the whole time. You did it. I did it. I said yes
Hmm.
and yes and yes and yes. I tried to make him happy. I tried to pretend everything's okay. I consensually said yes, go ahead, hurt me, cross my boundaries again, please, for so long. And at some point, I couldn't see a future. I couldn't take it anymore. And I was so hurt. And that was the first time, if we go to the V word, that's the first time I actually showed him how I was feeling, what was actually going on inside. Before then, it was a lot of trying to make it work,
Hmm.
thinking that I gotta make him happy. I just gotta make my husband happy, and that makes a good wife. But that is so not true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a learned behavior, isn't that? Um, I've got to make my husband happy, but it's not taught. And I'm speaking for all of us, like, it's not taught about communication. I think I've heard you guys talk about that we're not taught about healthy communication. We're not taught about, you probably, I don't even know if you realized you was not respecting yourself, or that you were okaying saying yes. You were just doing this behavior without even realizing
Yeah.
this is what is actually called or named. um and you thought everything was okay. Did you?
Well, I mean,
When she
it
blew
was.
up, was it a shock?
No, we
Okay.
had it brewing. We did see kind of coming the
Okay.
whole
Cool.
thing. And that's why this podcast is actually so vital, because you can have all the communication in the world. If you're not true to yourself, it's not going to go anywhere. Like, we have been talking, we had the communication, we were talking to each other, we were honest with each other. Yeah, well, good luck when you're not honest to yourself. What are you going to communicate? You got to communicate your lies.
That's so wow. So even if you have, so let me just get this right, just so, even if you talk about stuff, even if you communicate healthily, it doesn't make a difference if you're not true and authentic with yourself.
Yeah.
I just had this conversation with my friend before I go on the phone with you guys. And she actually, I'm just going to actually, she said the same thing, that she
Yeah.
wasn't being authentic to her husband. And that had to change. And I was like, well, you didn't tell me, because I would have told her what to do. But and I was telling her I was coming to speak to you guys, but that was the exact conversation we just had before I got on this,
Yeah.
that she had to be authentic with him. Wow. Wow. What do you think stopped you being authentic?
Oh, that's a simple one. Oh, I love it. It's very simple, but it's not so easy. Even when you know it, it's all the crap that your mind creates. It really is. It's like, oh my god, what are you gonna do? Oh my god, what about this and that? And there's all those mechanisms that are stopping you because of this projected fear in the future. And as one of my mentors said, fear stands for future events appearing real.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you have all this drama about what would happen, and you can't do this, and they're going to hurt you even more, and it's just going to be this uncomfortable, etc., etc. So one level is the mind, second level is the emotion, because the emotion itself is already uncomfortable. You feel hurt, you feel vulnerable and raw, and then so it's those two things that are coming, and then you block yourself from expressing. But what you don't realize is when you do block it, you're hurting yourself more. And so usually what happens is that eventually the pain gets so much that you can't hold it in anymore, and you're like, well, there's no other way forward anymore, right? So
Mm,
the holding is okay, is okay, is okay, is okay, and then eventually it's like I just can't. It's
yeah,
too much, and then it comes out,
it comes
and
out.
you realize actually life is going to be so much easier if you just say it from the beginning.
What were the fears? Like what? Because you say in the sense that, and I always like to go one step down. So you'd be like, oh, I'm the fear of what they're gonna say. But then
Mm.
what's underneath if they say that? What were those deeper fears?
For me, I think I was quite silent because I'm okay. You said the mind creates all this stuff. So let's go into what my mind was telling me. I was scared that because I said yes to so many things, it's almost like, oh yes, the freedom and love, and yes, you can do that. Oh no, worry, don't worry about it. That's totally okay. I said yes so many times that I was afraid to reel it in and how he would react, right? So I can't control him. So if I said, oh, never mind, I actually don't mean that, or never mind, I changed my mind, it's no, you know, how would he react? And I was very scared of losing him. I think that was probably my biggest fear. I thought, man, if I really showed up, I mean, I was already a very unhappy wife. I just didn't want to admit it. I was like, oh, but if I came to him admitting that I was unhappy and now he had an unhappy wife, now I had to deal with all these things, would he stay? Like, would he actually
Mm,
work through this with me? Or would he just be like, well, that's not what I wanted, like you said yes to all these things. I like my freedom. I like, how things have been, and all these no's and boundaries, and now I have to change. And no, I was thinking he might have reacted like that and be like, no, that's not the relationship I want. That's not, how things should be, and that's not going to work with me. So I was really afraid. I was actually thinking like, okay, if we were to split, how would my life look like? I was really going there because I was
mm,
really thinking that it could break the whole thing if I admitted to him, like if I was vulnerable, if I was authentic, if I really showed up with all this baggage and opened up that garage door. I really thought maybe he'd be like, okay, no thanks.
wow.
Mhm.
I have a question about that garage door, opening up the garage door to you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Him. What did you already see some of that baggage though?
Yes.
Mm. And that's what I always like to say people. It's like we're scared that people are going to see us for real, for real. But most of the time, whilst they don't know everything, they can see us more than we actually realize.
Right, right, yeah. I just want to add a different perspective for my side, me being vulnerable. What I had the issue, the thing that my mind was projecting, which I was actually completely unaware of at this time, it was that I had a certain self-image, and the self-image was, being strong and unfazed by things and whatever, and then admitting actually that you're hurting me. What you're doing, those small things, and the mind would actually then deny it, be like, well, what's the big deal? She just said something about the carrot not being washed or something, like. But it actually, the whole thing, because it was almost going a little bit into a passive aggressive behavior, it was under the radar, so my mind was rationalizing it. It's not such a big deal, rather than being true to what I was feeling, and then actually seeing like, yeah, I can be hurt, and those small things, they hurt me, so it was going against the self-image, and I was afraid to admit that to myself.
Hmm. That's, yeah, because you had to, apparently be strong. And why should that bother you? It's just a small thing.
Yeah.
I think like we all, but especially like, I'm not even going to generalize, but it's truth. But for the man, it's like the word of hurt is not allowed in society, in quotation marks, or shall I say honored, um, for men in that sense, you know. And so why would you, you know, and women just need to be the dopeful wife. We can't speak up. I'm just talking of, you know, gender roles that are actually shown in society but not actually helpful or
Mm.
or true. Did you feel like you lost power when you admitted to yourself you were hurt?
Oh no, I gain power.
Hmm. Yeah.
I gain power because first of all, I become more fluid in how I can show up, and second of all, the the emotions. Like, what kind of strength is that that you can't accept your own hurt? What kind of strength is that that you can't be vulnerable? You're just pretending. You're just wearing this pretentious armor. It's nothing to do with strength.
Wow. I love that. So you guys blow up, you get to this point. What stops you? I'm thinking at some point, maybe I kind of read your story that you was almost at the divorce stage. What stops you from getting divorced? How do you, you know, what stops you and how are you able to turn things around?
Mhm. Love. I think that's going to be the word. Like, you can't really rationalize it on why are you going to stay. In this moment when Natasha told me, for me there was a recognition. There was a recognition of what she was going through, and with it came compassion and empathy and wanting to change things.
Mm.
That's what happened. And so I was like, so all the fears that she had about me, running away, well, they were all made up.
Okay.
you know
So I'm going to ask about that. I always push people when they tell me love, because love is so many different things. Um, when you say love, what do you mean by that? Like, how are you defining that?
You can properly define love with the mind. Okay. Love is an experience, and an expression in the moment, right? Yes, you can see love through different filters, but in this moment, it's just there. Like, you care about this person and what she's going through, and she means something to you. She's important. But again, like, that's just the mind's story about it. Like, that experience in that moment is just, you just compelled. I was just compelled towards it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because some people love, but still don't try and work it out.
Right. Right.
D-
Now,
mhm.
there's you're right. The term love, we have to be somewhat careful with it, because some people, for example, they think love. If I love, for example, unconditionally, they just say yes to everything. No, that's not really love. That's a perverted version of love that
Mhm.
becomes hurtful towards yourself. So love is not just this lovey-dovey feeling. Love can actually be very fierce. Love can say no.
Mhm.
So that is, and it's a feeling. So I like to make distinction. You're either aligning yourself to your fears and insecurities, or towards love. And so if you
Mhm.
are not willing to work things out, you're most likely aligning to your fears and insecurities.
I love that distinction. I appreciate that. Thank you. What about you, Natasha? What made you decide? Is it the same answer? Not to give up.
I was losing hope at that point because I didn't know our path forward. But when even though we had like you said, we had communication, so we were talking about the issues, but not quite, right? So not quite going there, two steps down. But in that moment, I really saw that he saw me. He saw me, and there was still care and there was still love. And I didn't feel that for a long time because it was so not nice how we were being together, and it was just constant struggle, this conflict that never got resolved. Like, we were just stuck. That's it. We were stuck. But at that moment when I saw that he saw me and almost understood how I felt. I don't know about how much he understood, but he understood where I was at emotionally. I knew that there was something there still. It was as if that recognition brought us together again, like as a team. And together we wanted to do something about it. Well, before it was kind of us two coming together and tackling the problem. So it wasn't really the same. This was us two coming together to work it out. And so I knew that there was a chance that we could, like, finally, there was hope again. I didn't quite know how in that moment. We actually reached out to a professional because we were really stuck. We didn't know what to do anymore. So there was a lot of work to be done to repair everything, to take responsibility for everything that we have personally done to ourselves and to each other. There needed to be forgiveness. And we needed at one point to also revisit, do you want to stay together despite knowing everything fully now, like not like actually taking responsibility for what has happened. And that was the journey forward. But I would say that love isn't enough. In that moment, there was a lot of love and recognition and understanding and compassion, all of that, yes. But was that enough to heal? It was enough to start the healing journey, but that is not the healing journey.
Mm.
Right? The healing journey takes a lot of work, a lot of changes, actually, changes in perception, changes in behavior, and that doesn't come naturally just with love.
I love that. There's something so powerful in being seen. Unfortunately, everyone has not experienced that. I have, and it's not even just, it doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship, but I have actually experienced that numerous times. And it's like, it's mind blowing. It's what our hearts desires. So it sounds like that was another powerful piece, because that's what we all want. Like, as humans, we want to be seen, loved, understood, and connected, and all these other stuff kind of get in the way. So you guys are so story's so good. I can talk to you forever. But tell us a bit about some of those steps, and where they've kind of brought you to today.
Mm. So the steps once we cracked open, right? So so as Natasha mentioned, we actually reached out to a professional. It was like a 7-day cleanse or 1-to-1. Each one of us was going separately through it. And in that, you really look at all the different things that you've done. It's highly unpleasant because you are looking at all the stuff that you were denying, and you see some of the darkness and the hurt and the disempowerment that you have been playing in the relationship towards yourself and your partner. However, through this recognition, through seeing it, you get the power to transform it. And so that is what we did. At the end of this cleanse, this lady sat us down, and as Natasha mentioned, she asked us, well, do you still want to be together? Right now, after going through all the, all the nastiness for yourself for 7 days, you're very raw. And yes, we did want to stay together. We did want to stay together. And then from then on, because we were aware of how the patterns are playing out, we were able to actually turn them around. So it's one thing to recognize them, it's another thing to then actually live up to your commitment and say, I'm not going to have this anymore in the relationship. I'm not tolerating in it anymore. We are going to move in a different direction, which is why, like in our programs and whatever, we are teaching people, look, the negative communications patterns like bickering, nagging, blaming, criticizing, all of those things, they zap your energy and you want to actually change them. And you got to change the other stuff inside of you as well, what's bringing up this whole bunch of stuff. But you really want to look at those, and that's what we did after the cleanse, is actually do that, where we had many talks, sitting down and be like, this is where I felt blamed, this is where I feel you're being passive aggressive. And I mean, those conversations were not very pleasant. They were not pleasant for me. They were not pleasant for Natasha. And for me at this point, it was really you make it or you break it. Like every time we were slipping somewhat back in some of those patterns, I felt this urge to just run away. Like it was so
Mm.
unpleasant for me. So for me, it was like either we're going to shift and really embrace this new way, or we're not going to make it because I just couldn't handle it.
Mm. Wow. So you knowing that I want to run away was a way of saying, "Oh, we're shifting back. We're going back into those patterns."
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's what I was feeling, this energy. And so that's why I was like, okay, it's too uncomfortable, we gotta address it. The other one is also comfortable, this is more uncomfortable, so I gotta address it, we gotta do that. And that is
Yeah.
what then, like, we did not realize how much energy is tied up in this negativity. Like those small little conflicts really like drain your energy. And when you get rid of them, like the amount of energy that's released and the empowerment that you feel and the synergy that you feel together and the things you can create are just amazing. Like
Mm.
you don't realize what you're sacrificing. You think it's normal because so many are doing it, but it's not healthy. And it really just it locks you in a place. You can't evolve as a couple. You can't give yourself into the world fully because you're busy nagging at each other or bickering with each other.
Yeah.
It's really
You,
not helpful.
you know what that kind of reminds me of? I'm not trying to, minimize it, but it reminds me of adjusting when I one time a few years back I adjusted my social media feed.
Mm.
And I still do that, do a readjustment if there's too much negativity. And I know some people talk about their social media feed, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have that in my feed, because I made that adjustment because I realized how much that negativity does drain you. And I'm not even in a relationship with these people. So I can't even begin to think what that's like in a relationship.
Absolutely. And because it is in a relationship, it's a certain dynamic. So you think it's nothing, but then when someone does something disempowering to you either retreat, so you kind of like lock yourself in and you become even more isolated, which is really not that great for the relationship, or because someone brought you down even on a very subtle level, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel good. So it kind of triggers some ego within you, and you kind of want to one up them. So in the next interaction, in the smallest way, unconsciously, you're trying to find some way to get back at him, and that's where the bitterness and resentment comes in, or the tonality of the voice. Then you're trying to do that back at him because a
Hmm.
part of you does not accept that. No matter if you don't set your boundaries, okay, but a part of you desperately wants to set those boundaries and desperately wants to be respected. So then it kind of goes there in this sneaky little way, and then you try to disempower him, and so it just keeps on going, and so you find these couples in these power struggles where literally he's doing something mean, she's doing something mean, like little things. Like you can't, it's hard to say because it's passive aggressive. It's, oh, what old couples do. But man, you're in this empowerment cycle. You're just trying to
Wow.
take power away from each other again and again. So it's like even more active than like the social media feed because it's what you see and what you absorb. But this, it creates a dynamic. It literally becomes a dance that you two do. And I think everyone can relate to this because when you meet someone new and it's all wonderful and it's all the honeymoon, you're like, it brings out the best in us. I like you lift me up. I feel my best. I can do things I can't do otherwise. But over time, these couples bring out the worst in each other. And why? Because of this dynamic of, oh, you did that, okay, now I'm going to do this. And before you know it, you're down this very, very deep spiral where you don't recognize who you are, what you're doing. You wouldn't do or say that to other people in your life, but it's such a sticky dynamic, this power struggle you've created.
Wow. You guys have discovered this. You're kind of working through it because you're still working through it. And then you decided to help other people.
Right.
What what made you decide that?
Right.
Because you
Well,
could have kept it for yourself.
yeah. But so once we actually started, transforming it and saw the results, it was amazing. And both of us have been, working with people for a long time, and so we decided, and we care about the world, we care about other people, and we want to make a difference. And so one way we can make a difference is going into relationships, because society's building blocks are relationships. And if you can shift how we're relating to each other, you are going to transform how society is working. Okay, so that is what was at the heart of this, why we decided to go into it, because we are working with people, because we care about what we're doing and how we're showing up, because we can see where we're heading, as a society. And so we want to make a small contribution to help shift where the ship is heading. Basically, there's lots that needs to be done when you look at the state of affairs, but that is one thing that you can do. And it has a tremendous impact, because if you're relating differently in the romantic relationship, if you have kids, you're going to bring up your kids differently. They're going to have better role models. The way you are going to interact with your colleagues is going to be different, right? Because you are not coming from a place of feeling disempowered already, and bad. You're coming from a full place. You're coming from a place of love, of feeling accepted, of feeling cherished, of feeling like that you matter. So how can you show up in the workplace is going to be different. So it has this ripple effect
Hmm.
throughout your life when you start to shift this dynamic, which is why we decided to do this. We're passionate about helping people.
Wow, I love that. So, would you say authenticity is at the core of this, or just,
it, it,
or like a big part?
it's a big part. It for sure is a big part. You need to have it in order to actually make changes. Like, what the mind can dream up anything in a second. You can go to Mars, you can go to a different universe, you can create beings that are not there. You can create anything within a split second. Okay, so the authenticity is so important, because it's the anchor. Where are you going to? What kind of change are you creating? Is it the change just because your mind just came up with it? Well, what's the base for that? What's the drive behind that? So the authenticity is what gives the direction for the relationship to evolve, right? Like your friend said to she has to be authentic with her husband. Well, yeah, because when you're authentic with your partner, then there's going to be a catalyst towards change, because you're showing up as yourself, and some of the patterns just can't go on anymore, because when you're authentic, you can feel the hurt and the difficulties that this is creating. And you don't want to be in a relationship where you have to wear a mask all the time, right? So authenticity is so important for it. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. So, what would you like the audience to take away? What's each of you something that you would like the audience to take away?
Mm.
Okay, I guess based on my own story and my own experience, it's to fully acknowledge yourself. And I think that's the wonderful thing about this whole conversation and about authenticity, is that it's very much about you and yourself. Yes, there's the expression part, which then touches others in the world, but really it's about you. And when a lot of people come to us with relationship problems, I would say 85% of the time, the problem is still pointed towards the other person. So there's still a great deal of blame on the other person. For some, there is a level of recognition that, okay, maybe I'm contributing to this too, because it is my relationship, or my partner is reacting to how I am being in the relationship too. But a lot of the times, that underlying energy is still like, make him change, like like how do I make him stop that? Or like, oh, make him like, that bothers me about him. If only, he did this and this, I'd be okay. And yes, there are needs to be met within a relationship. It is a relationship between two people. But I think the wonderful thing about authenticity is that you got to know yourself. You got to take responsibility for what's going on within you. And for me, it was not easy to start that process. Like that looking inward for the first time, um, you might not feel like it matters, or that, like, what's the point of it? Like, if you don't come from a place where you truly acknowledge and love and respect yourself, it's like, why am I doing this? Like, there's so many other people in the world I could help and serve, and I'd rather focus outwardly. But no, I think if you truly want to have a very successful relationship, you do need to tap into that vulnerability and that authenticity. And if you don't, you're very much robbing your partner of who you really are, like where you can really go. Because the moment you tap into that, yes, that you might see some stuff that's unprocessed, or that's quite ugly, or that's painful to deal with. But when you come through that, and I think our story is that we came through that, we looked inside, we saw the nastiness, we took responsibility, but we could come to the other side. And the other side is that you can be yourself and you can show up. And then that's the magic. That's the magic. And it's better than the honeymoon. It's more than just pleasure. It's more than just balanced in the equation of, I did this today, so you got to fix the fence tomorrow. It's not this mathematical, transactional relationship anymore. It's you showing up in your full self, and it provides this magical opportunity for your partner to really be with you. And I think that's the type of relationship where in our soul, deep, deep within our soul, we're longing for this kind of connection. And I believe it's impossible to have if you're not authentic in this way.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
One takeaway I'd like to give, and it's a question really, and the question is, how would your life be if you didn't have to be anyone? That's one question. And the second question is, how would your partner change if you would stop thinking that you know them?
I love questions. Thank you. Wow. Two very thought-provoking questions. I appreciate that. So, how can people shower you with love? How can they connect with you?
Mm-hmm. We do have our own podcast. So if you want to check it out, it's awakenedwife.com. Now, today we talked a lot about communication. And it's a symptom, I think, of certain things going on within you when you're misaligned with yourself, or you're not being honest with yourself or your partner. So we have a little quiz. It's kind of fun. You can take it and figure out whether you make some mistakes, very common mistakes, those subtle stuff we're talking about. You can take it and then you can get the results and see where you're at. Is it extremely toxic? Is it a little bit negative? Are you on a good path? And actually, on the other day, we were on an interview with on another podcast, and the host took it and he was like, "Oh, I got everything so-called right." Well, it's not, it's not like a school exam, but he's like, "Oh, but I admit there was one, and then I saw that, I read the results, and then I realized, I do bring up issues or concerns regarding the relationship, but I do it in a way where it's like, oh, did you notice that this happened? No big deal, but like just bringing it up a little bit, but not owning it, not owning his emotions, not owning his experience. So anyways, it's kind of fun because a lot of people have learned a lot from just taking the quiz, and you can get that for free at yourexceptionalrelationship.com/understand.
Cool. I will definitely put that in the show notes. Do you have any social media handles, or just your website and your podcast is the best way? Okay, cool. Perfect. Well, it is a pleasure having you both on the podcast. Got so many gems. So I appreciate you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
We appreciate you too.
If you connected with what you just heard, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. You can stay connected by following the Instagram Bianca Keisha, spelled Keisha, Kesha, or visiting the website authenticwednesday.com. Remember, authenticity is a journey, not a destination.